program. And then lastly, for several of our competitions, we also include additional outcomes. For our social behavioral program, we're looking at social behavioral competencies. We have a number of programs where we're looking at adults in the system. So you might see people that are measuring teacher outcomes or leader outcomes. And then we also, in some of our programs, allow for employment and earnings outcomes. So work on labor markets. Next slide.
Next slide. So we have a great question in the chat. I think it's perfectly aligned with this slide, which is IES synonymous with the Department of Education? And I'll mention a little bit, but then I'll definitely let Katina take over because she's been at IES a lot longer. So we always say IES is the independent research arm of the U.S. Department of Education. And it's really important, the independent part, because there are some differences in the Department of Education with each political change in the president. Lots of positions turnover. And so it's kind of important through our work at IES that there's a lot more consistency. We are nonpartisan, and so we don't have a lot of changes that happen because of these changes in the president and the secretary of education. So we're definitely under the Department of Education. We're one of the offices. And then I'll talk to this slide in a little bit. Maybe Katina, if you want to also address that question, any additional thing to add?
Mm-hmm. I think that that's a really good summary. One way I like to think about it is that everyone in the department has the same mission, which is to have the best and improved outcomes for all students. Each office in the department goes about this in a different way. And our purpose is to provide the research to make this happen. So we fund researchers directly through our research programs. A slide that we skipped was the organizational structure of IES. So there's other parts of IES that do other things to support that mission. So NCES provides data for use, and then our National Center for Evaluation and Regional Assistance also does large-scale evaluations of programs and runs things like the What Works Clearinghouse that produces evidence that people out in the field can use.
And so we often will tell people we don't fund programs. So a lot of people are looking for money to fund their programs. We fund research, but there are parts of the Department of Education that fund programs. So here's some of the ways that we make decisions about like what we're going to be investing in. We have different competitions each year. And so we have a director, and they have different priorities and input into what we compete each year. Also, we have input from the field. We have technical working groups. And I mentioned in my panel discussion about that's one way we can broaden participation. We welcome you to sign up to participate as a reviewer, get into our database. We use that database sometimes to pull people for technical working groups. We also have public comment sometimes and other different stakeholder discussions. Also, as program officers, we get a chance to add input into these competitions. We do a review of the field in each of our topic areas that we're over, then that can inform some decisions that are made about special topics or special directions and competitions. And then we also interact with different Department of Education programs, like the Office of Special Education Program, Office of English Learners, different offices that often will inform our information about our research investments. Katina, you have some more closely aligned with our training programs. Is there anything to add about some decisions we make about training programs?
Yes. So over the years, I'd say since 2004, we have had a number of research training programs, and every few years we stop and say, where are the gaps in the field? What should we be doing more or less of? Similar to our research programs, we do state of the field, and we have technical working groups that come in. We've had one that has come in for the training programs. And so we started with our predoctoral and postdoctoral programs, and then we expanded out to our undergraduate program, Pathways to the Education Sciences, because we realized that we needed to start earlier in recruiting people into the education sciences and giving them a passion for it. In one of the earlier panels, someone said, people have to be deliberate about becoming computer scientists. And so we always joke that no one goes to college saying, I'm going to be an education researcher, right? It's to learn what that is and gain a joy for it. And so that was our purpose in large part for putting pathways in place. And then more recently, we received feedback in our TWIG on different ways in which we could increase diversity in the education sciences. And that was a large part of the reason that we launched our new early career program. So I hope that helps and answers the question.
And Lucas has a great question in the chat. Does IES fund research on factors that influence student outcomes? For instance, research on efforts to improve faculty members' ability to teach diverse students, successful positively influence student success. So how far outside direct impact on students does IES fund research? So definitely we have a professional development topic area at NICSR, the Special Education Research Center. And we have funded projects where people are looking at improving general education as well as special education teachers' ability to teach diverse students when it comes to students with disabilities, as well as English learners with disabilities. And I know in NCR, they also have a similar topic area in instruction, is it? Gina may know more about that topic.
Yeah, the name of the topic changes every couple of years, but there is a topic that is focused on K through 12 instruction. We have, today, I'm not sure that we have funded that much, if anything, on funding improving instruction at the post-secondary level. We do get inquiries, but I'm not sure that anyone has actually been funded at that level, but we fund a lot at the K-12 level.
And I have seen similar topics funded by the National Science Foundation too, that's very STEM focused. Okay, we have another question. Okay, let's see.
So we had a question that came in about the peer review process.
Oh, great, thank you.
So it was just how do we manage it, if you want to answer that.
Okay, great. So we're actually not responsible for managing the peer review process. We have an actual separate office. And could you go back to slide 9? I think as Katina mentioned, we skipped over our organizational structure slide, but we actually have an Office of Science that's under the director, and that is one in charge of reviewing reports that the Evaluation Center produces, but also is responsible for setting up our peer review panels. I think it's a little bit earlier, slide 9. It has like a graphic with these little boxes.
It's slide 7.
Okay, perfect. Slide 7. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so you can see the Office of Science here. And so they are the ones that select the reviewers. They do sometimes get suggestions from us if we know people in the field, especially because they really are trying to broaden participation. And then also they may give us a list of some to see if we have any feedback on them. But in general, they do control that whole peer review process. And the website, I can look for the link and put it in here, has 3 great videos I recommend you watch that talks about the peer review process. You can actually see a mock panel review to see how they discuss the review and learn more about sort of like the journey of an application through that whole process. One thing that makes us different from other federal agencies is that us as program officers, we do not have a lot of control over who gets picked in terms of the winning applications and who gets funded. So we're able to provide a lot of technical assistance because we're so separate from that panel review process. And so I highly recommend you take a look at some of those resources. And I think Katina has put a link to our funding website that has our competitions. And then on that page, it also, I think, has a link to the science office's videos.
Yeah, so we had a question come in that I thought was really timely. It's, what do you do with all this information if you're a beginner, essentially? And how do you do it without being totally overwhelmed? And so that's why I dropped our link in here. So this is where you just want to get started. So everything you would ever want to know about what we fund is off of this page. There's a graphic there that leads you through the steps. There's a link to our webinars that we put together each year that provide a basic overview of everything. And also there's a link to our technical assistance sessions where we have office hours where you can contact people to ask questions. And then I think what's most important is that IES program officers can talk to you really at any time about your research. So if push comes to shove and you go to this website and you're like, I'm just tragically confused, I don't know what it is, you should just email a program officer and they'll respond. That's our job. So just give us enough information so that we can try to put you in the right direction. And, you know, sometimes of the year we're busier than others, so we might not get back to you right away. So if that happens, just nudge the person again. So if you can't figure out who to contact, you could always email me or email Sarah, and we can help you get to the right person as well. But what they might tell you when you reach them is, why don't you watch the webinar first? So we want you to start at the webinar and then contact us if you have further questions. And Sarah, I'm also going to put the reviewer link in there as well. If people
Oh, great. Yeah, we definitely want you to sign up to be a reviewer, because you learn so much that process that'll really help inform if you ever do apply to IES. And I always tell people it's a persistence game. I mean, rarely do people get funded their first time. About 13% of our applications get selected, and many of those are not first-time applicants. And so I always cheer, like last year I had someone, it was her 5th year applying, finally got awarded. I mean, we work closely with you, but it's definitely not easy money. It's not quick money you want to plan on for the next year. It is a very competitive process, but it's also a very large dollar size. Many of the other federal agencies that I've seen don't have as large dollar size grants. And so you want to be persistent and work with us. Can you go to the very last slide? Because that one, I think, or second to last slide, that lists the funding programs we have this year. There you go. Okay. So I wanted to, just because we don't have a lot of time, to show you what we are competing this year. Where I work at the Special Education Center, we have a lot less money. And so we weren't able to actually have our regular standard research competition. So we have special money from Congress that's related to the pandemic. And so we have a very unique competition this year called Research to Accelerate Pandemic Recovery in Special Education. So the link Katina shared earlier with funding opportunities, you can learn more about that there, and definitely reach out to me for some more tailored technical assistance I can provide you. But then Katina, if you want to talk about any of the NCER ones, they have a lot more competitions.
Sure, we have 5 open competitions. And so one of them, 305S, is also focused on recovery. And then the other 4 are our regular competitions. 305A is what we would call our main or sort of bedrock competition, where most people apply to do research. And so it funds exploratory studies, the development of interventions, development and validation of measures, as well as efficacy studies, where you try to determine the impact of interventions. Our 305R, the replication one, is sort of an extension of that, where we fund replications of studies of products or trainings or interventions, whatever it is that is already has some evidence of effectiveness. We want to see, you know, was that a fluke? Does it happen again? So there's that competition. And then we also have 2 other competitions. One is the stats and research methodology competition. So for those of you who are out there designing new statistical methods or ways to figure things out better, quicker, faster, you can apply to that competition. And then lastly is the research training competition. This year we have 3 training programs that are being competed. One is a methods training program. Second is our postdoctoral program. And then the other one is our early career program for faculty at minority serving institutions.
And at the Special Education Center, we also often will have training and early career grant programs this year, but again, because of limited funding, we don't have those. And I also wanted to say that you don't have to work at a university to apply to our grant programs. Like pretty much just anyone can apply. It is important that you have a strong research team though, that have its experience in the field. And so this is where it's really important to network. And so you could have an industry partner, you can have a university partner, you could have a school partner, a state education agency partner. You know, it's really all over the place in terms of who's been funded. And we have a search engine. I can also post a link to see what we have funded in the past. And I always recommend that people get sample applications that have been successful. Principal investigators are very willing to share. And so get samples so that you can see some of the funded proposals.
Yeah, and then one other important thing to put out there is that we just have a number of different deadlines this year. And so some of the things that we're talking about, the deadlines have just passed or are about to pass. So when you go to the website, at this point, you're really looking at things that have a September 9th deadline. And so that's education research, research training programs in the education sciences, the systematic replication RFA, and then the pandemic recovery and special education RFA. Because the ones due tomorrow, you're not going to make.
Can you go to the last slide that has our contact information, just because we only have a few more minutes? Make sure we didn't, if we missed your question because we were posting on these links, please repost it so we make sure we didn't miss it. Okay, so someone asked, are we able to share the slides? Definitely. If you could email us, that's probably the best way to get the slides to you. I'm not sure if this includes network, like website has them. I think they do, but just in case, just feel free to email us and we would be glad to.
Sarah, I can chime in about that. We will be posting recordings and slides on the national network.
Okay, wonderful.
And so,
sorry, yes, I will put our emails in the chat so you guys can copy that.
And so we had that question from on peer review earlier, and I know that we gave them the link to the peer review process, but we might want to just take a minute to sort of like walk them through what happens to an application when they submit it. And I can do that. So when you submit an application to IES, first of all, you want to make sure it's on time and actually has all the information that was requested, because that's actually the very first part of the review is what we call compliance and responsiveness. Compliance is largely, was it on time and does it have all the required sections? Responsiveness is, did you include all the required information? So in our RFAs, each section will have something that says like required versus recommended. Recommended is really considered by the peer reviewers, but required is reviewed before it even goes to peer reviewer. So if you're missing a piece of the required information, no matter how small, it just won't go on. So you really want to pay attention to that and make sure you have all of the required information in that. And I was like, my office is strangely getting dark. It's bad lighting here. I think it's going to storm. So that's why I'm in shadows, you guys. So,
and also I'll just say real quick, because of timing, in case we get cut off in 2 minutes,
yes,
we have a whole webinar on the submission process. And so I'm going to put the link. I highly recommend you look at our webinars.
Yes. So you're going to submit it. It's going to make sure it's compliant and responsive. And then generally 2 to 3 reviewers will read it. It'll be assigned to them and they'll give their determination of how good they think your proposals are rather. And if they like it enough, then it'll go on to a full panel. And so there'll be a meeting now virtually where a group of people, maybe 15 to 20 of them, sometimes smaller for some panels, will discuss your application and give it scores. And all of this is overseen by the Standards and Review Office. Everyone there will score them, and then those scores come to us essentially as a recommendation. And those applications that have the best scores, and there will be a cut that's set every year to determine what that'll be, those will then be considered for funding from IES. And so there's a notification process. At each stage, you'll get an email that says, that it's being considered in the system. And then once it's not being considered anymore, you also get an email that tells you that, so you're not hanging around waiting for forever. But there are videos on that IES review site that you put, and also off of the main funding page that explain these things to you. So that's a quick and dirty description.
Yes, you did a good job. It's hard to explain
Thank
that
you.
long process. So I can't reiterate enough to work with us. We actually will often review entire proposals. If you get it to us early enough, we'll review pieces and parts. And even if you're a year out from applying and you want to start writing and working with us, we're open to that too. Just so reach out anytime. And if we're not the right person, if there's a better person in our office because of the topic area, we'll connect you with them as well.